Hi everyone, welcome to week 6 of Intro to Folk Studies. I hope you are all doing well on this Monday. Wanted to start off with a reminder that your final research paper, your fieldwork project that hopefully you've been working on for a few weeks now, is due 1 week from today. So next Monday, March 5th, by 11:59 p.m. So anytime during the day next Monday, you'll be submitting that final paper. And in fact, you're welcome to submit it early if you're done. The link is now available to turn in this assignment. So it is under the Assignments tab on Blackboard in the Research Project folder. So the same place that you went to see the requirements and everything for the assignment. There's now a link that says Turn in Final Research Paper. So that is where you'll go to attach and submit your file when you're ready to turn it in sometime before next Monday at the end of the day. As you're finishing writing the paper over the next week, just a couple reminders that it's good to go back and look at the assignment requirements, at the rubric that's posted, at the transcript example, all those resources that are there for you. And remember that one thing that you really need to be focusing on doing as you're writing is making connections to things that we've talked about in class. So you're doing that by using specific direct connections to readings, to lectures, to films, to things that we have studied, including direct quotes. Okay, and then you also need to be incorporating specific and direct evidence from your fieldwork, right? So again, using direct quotes and examples from your interview, from your observation. Okay, so for instance, you might describe how your interviewee told you a particular story about something. You offer a quote that illustrates that story, and then you talk about how that connects to, something that we read in a specific article, how it reminded you of X, Y, and Z, and again, kind of quoting, whatever concept or term or example you see a connection with between what you observed, what you heard in your interview and your observation of your group, and between what we've been reading in class. Okay, I observed people wearing this thing, and it reminded me of this example that we talked about from folk costume, and I will explain that, and then explaining that connection that you see. Okay. You also need to make sure as you're doing that, as you're including those specific examples and quotes, that you are citing your sources correctly. So please, if you have any questions about how to do that, please note that there is that link in that research project folder to an MLA, a online resource for using MLA citation style. So remember, you need to be citing, at the very least, everyone will be citing their interview that they conducted. Okay? And ideally, you'll be also citing a couple sources from class that you're making connections to. Okay? Remember that plagiarism is grounds for failure in the course. So you need to be really careful that you're citing sources correctly and not drawing in anything that is not your own writing, that's not taking credit for any ideas or words that are not your own. Okay, if you have questions about any of that, again, please let Chloe or I know in the next week. And just like any paper that you would turn in, make sure that you're carefully proofreading and making it a polished final draft before submitting it on Monday. Okay. There are instructions at the link where you're turning this in, but just a couple reminders. One, be sure to check out the specific file types that are permitted for submitting your file, so that you're making sure you're turning in a document that I can open. That's on that link. The instructions are spelled out there. And also remember that you're turning in your 4 to 5 pages, your works cited, and your transcript of your interview segment. Okay. It is okay if those things are all in one document, but they aren't part of the same page count. So for example, if you turn in 2 pages of writing and a works cited page is the 3rd page and a transcript is the 4th page, that's not considered a fully developed paper. So 4 to 5 pages of it should be your own writing, your research paper, and then an additional page of the works cited, additional page or pages of the transcript. So moving on, a couple responses to your discussion posts last week. It seemed like folks really enjoyed the Painted Bride video. A lot of people had comments about that. You all made some nice connections between body lore and performance and folk costume and gender, and kind of thinking about those topics. There were a couple of questions and comments that came up that I'd like to respond to. One about the idea of what folklorists consider performance. And it seemed like some people were really engaging with that idea and interested in the kind of wide range of activities that we look at as being performative. And I wanted to, first of all, say, you're right that it is interesting how many kinds of things that we do, how many kinds of our activities can be considered performances. But also, just to remind you that, the most important thing is not so much to think about, well, does this activity count as a performance or does this activity not count as a performance, but rather to think about how using that framework of performance, using that approach to viewing and analyzing activities makes us ask different kinds of questions about what it is we're looking at, okay? So, for example, rather than saying, well, is cooking always a performance, right? Then you can think about, well, if I'm watching someone cook a meal for their family, who's the audience, right? Is there an audience? Like, is there someone who they are hoping will taste this thing that they cooked and say, oh my gosh, that's amazing. It tastes just like mom used to make, okay? So thinking about it, just kind of looking at activities, especially that are derived from tradition, right? So especially things that constitute folklore, looking at them as performance helps us to kind of ask about the framing of our activities, the framing of our events and stories, and how people are responding to them. So looking at framing an audience becomes really important when you're thinking about this performance-centered approach and model. Another pattern that emerged in your discussion posts, a lot of folks were talking about costumes, and I just wanted to reinforce the idea that a folk costume, and you guys were connecting examples from the video, from the Painted Bride, to the maintenance of heritage, the Swedish folk costume, doing that really nicely. And a couple of you brought up examples from your own experience, things like what people wear to church on Easter Sunday, for instance. And just remember, those are great. Those are all good examples, but also costumes don't have to be sort of like exotic. They don't have to be foreign. So, some folks were talking about it as though, well, those people have costumes, but we don't, right? And keep in mind, we all have folklore, right? And we all wear things that signify our membership in particular groups, okay? So a costume could be something that seems very ordinary to you. For instance, if you wear Greek letters to indicate your membership in a Greek organization, or even, what we might consider the sort of costume of a WKU student, right? You wear a red Hilltoppers t-shirt and jeans to class, right? That shows your membership in this student body. So just keep in mind that costumes don't have to be these sort of elaborate, again, exotic seeming examples of dress, right? They can be things that are very much part of our, and in fact often are, things that are very much part of our daily lives, okay? So in general, I just wanted to comment too that you guys did a really nice job bringing in earlier concepts and terms into your discussion posts this week. So folks were talking about how individuals carry on traditions, connecting this idea of Pakistani henna painting in an American context where some aspects of American weddings and culture are also incorporated, talking about that as an example of folklore being dynamic, traditions being dynamic, connecting the idea of folklore and gender back to the article we read by Catherine Borland, where she was talking about feminism, connecting the idea of commodification and appropriation to maybe some different kinds of henna practices that we see in our contemporary culture. So all these are great connections, and I just want to encourage you to keep doing those sorts of applications of specific traditions, specific examples to larger concepts. That's exactly the kind of thing I'm going to be asking you to do in large part on your final exam. So it's great preparation for your exam to be thinking about how these different things that we're learning about are connected and how particular examples illustrate larger concepts. That exam is March 9th, Friday of next week. So we'll talk more about that at the beginning of next week, and I'll give you a little bit more detail. But just kind of a heads up, that is coming, and those are, if you're thinking in that direction, then you're already getting prepared for that. Okay. So a couple final comments about this week. We are wrapping up this week with the last of the sort of big three folklore genres. So we've talked about verbal, material, and now we're talking about customary culture. Okay, so we're talking about customs, not to be confused with costumes, which we talked about last week, but customs that people participate in, actions, things that people do, rituals, festivals, this idea of inversion that often accompanies the festival. So these are all things that you'll be reading about, starting off with a kind of general introduction to the concept of ritual in your textbook, reading about a specific Mardi Gras celebration, so a particular community festival that will be described in your reading, and then watching another film, this time about a festival in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is still ongoing, and I will try to remember to share with you later this week an article that's kind of an update on that festival and the sort of conflicts that you see evolve during the film that documents it. You'll find that the link to that film, the Fiesta in Santa Fe film, the same place you did find your film last week, under the readings tab, you'll find a link to that. After this week, as you are, I'm sure, aware, we'll get into our final week where we'll be kind of wrapping up some of the more general kind of theoretical ways in which people understand folklore, why that knowledge is important, how it can be applied. So some kind of concluding thoughts about all of that. But in the meantime, this week, as we're working through this last major area of content, be mindful of the fact that you have your final discussion board post, your final quiz due, and then again, of course, those projects due Monday of next week, Monday, March 5th. Okay. So hope to hear from you if you have questions. In the meantime, hope you all have a very nice week, and I will talk to you again soon. Take care.